What is up, you guys? Welcome on into Pickswise Playbook Week 14 edition. I'm Lauren Jabara. That's Tank Williams. That's Jared Smith. And I got my points right today, guys. It is a beautiful day to be alive. Tank, how are we? We're already at Week 14. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, I'm good, and we still know that Joe Burrow doesn't give a damn about anybody's revenge, and I love to see it.
You'll love to see Joe Burrow beating the Kansas City Chiefs 3 times in a calendar year, Jared. How are you feeling heading into Week 14?
No, the Jets don't give a damn about scoring in the red zone. Apparently that's optional, right? They got in 6 times. They scored once. We'll get into that a little later when we touch on this Vikings team. But yeah, rough day for my team, rough day for my picks. The hot streak is over, but we start a fresh one this week, right?
I
Want
like
to
it.
know I'm feeling pretty good because my Detroit Lions are 4-1 over the last 5 games.
Fire.
We're also going to get into that game. They're taking on the Minnesota Vikings for an NFC North matchup at home this week. But first of all, let's take it back to Week 13 for a second. NFL season betting stats. The unders are 107-84 so far in the season. That's hitting at a 56% rate, which is pretty crazy. Best against the spread teams. Giants and Bengals, both 9-3. The Titans, Cowboys, and Lions. One pride, 8-4 against the spread this season. There's still only 9 teams that have above a 500 record against unders. Quickly, I want to get into your Week 13 surprises before we fast forward to Week 14. Tank, for you, this way, what was your biggest Week 13 surprise?
Man, that AJ Brown can go out, ball against his former team, and then get the GM who refused to sign him to a long-term deal fired a couple days later. Like, that is the most revenge game that I've ever seen, and I don't think anything will ever top that. That was crazy.
And Jared, for you, what is your biggest Week 13 surprise?
Yeah, I didn't even put that together. That was a very surprising move, first of all.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't make that connection. Maybe AJ Brown made a call and said, "Listen, this guy's got to go." Man, that's so funny. I'll be honest. At this point in the season, nothing surprises me anymore. I'm expecting absolute chaos every single week. I expect every game to, we're continuing to have, it's the most one score. We had 7 more one score games on Sunday. It's the most one score games through the first 13 weeks of the season. The same stat held true last week through the first 12 weeks. And we had another game land on 1. The Broncos-Ravens game, 10-9 final. That's the 12th game to land on 1 this year. And the age-old adage in betting, games don't land 1. So don't worry about laying 1.5. You're fine. The game doesn't land 1. We only had 8 games land 1 all of last season. And we've already had 12 and still 5 weeks left. So it's just the parity of the league it's in the forefront. And I have nothing surprises me in this league anymore on a week-to-week basis.
We have 5 weeks left in the regular season for all of these NFL teams. A couple teams coming off of byes this week. But guys, at this point, 3 teams can clinch playoff scenarios. Let's go through them really quick before we start the show. Chiefs can clinch the AFC with a win and a Chargers loss. We'll be getting into both of those games. The Eagles can clinch a berth with a win or a tie, or in San Francisco plus Seattle losses. We'll get into those games too. And the Vikings can clinch a berth with a win or a tie, which brings me to that game. Is the wrong team favored in the Vikings-Lions? We'll get into that in a little bit, but just wetting the chops for a second. Let's get into some key Week 14 matchups before we get into the key divisional matchups. First and foremost, the Panthers taking on the Seahawks. Right now, that line is set at 3.5. The Seahawks stared the Rams in the face last week and snuck out a win. They're now 7-5 on the season and on the cusp of the playoffs at this point, guys. And the Panthers, they still might not be out of it in the NFC South coming off of a bye this week. This one is for anyone who thought that Seattle and Carolina would have playoff implications at this point of the season, which is basically no one. But here we are, and both might still have an opportunity to clinch the playoffs before the end of the year is done. It's really, really crazy, Tank. When you look at this one and the way that Seattle's offense has been playing, how do you see this game playing out? Would you feel comfortable laying the 3.5 points against the Panthers?
I don't think I would feel comfortable doing that because I like to kind of zoom out and look at things from a macro level. And I feel that both of these teams have a lot to play for. Like we've talked about how bad that NFC South is. And so the
Mm-hmm.
Panthers, even though they had to fire their head coach, they've gone through a number of different quarterbacks. They're still in playoff contention. And the one thing that really aligns with the Carolina Panthers in this matchup against the Seattle Seahawks is that the Seahawks can be ran on. Like they give up the second most rushing yards in the league. And the last I checked, Deontay Foreman, ever since he took over that number one role as the Carolina Panthers' number one running back since Chris McCaffrey was traded, like he's been running his tail off and he's been getting chunks of yardage
Yeah.
every clip, every game that he's played. And so I look at that as being a favorable matchup for the Carolina Panthers. And then when you flip it to the Seattle Seahawks, man, they motivated as hell. Like they're right in it for the NFC West title. They've just seen that Jimmy G has gone down. So now they have to contend with the 49ers team that's led by Brock Purdy right now. And like you said, they stared the Los Angeles Rams in the face. Geno Smith made a 2-minute drive late in the game, and they came away and they won the game. I really don't care if you win pretty or if you win up. There's so much parity in the NFL that Jared talked about leading into this segment is that only thing you have to worry about is winning, and the Seattle Seahawks did that. So now when I'm looking at this matchup, two evenly structured teams coming into this game motivated, I feel like my best play in this one would be the over because I feel like both offenses are going to be
Mm-hmm.
trying their best to try to will their team to a victory. And I could see a path for the Carolina Panthers scoring some points by running the ball, and I could see a path by Seattle just doing what they do, leaning on Geno, Lockett, DK Metcalf in the pass game. I'm not sure what's going to take place with that running back situation, but I feel like if they can put a healthy body in there, they should be okay against the Carolina Panthers. So give me the over 43.5.
This game opened up at Seattle laying 6, and obviously the running game probably is not going to be the same without Kenneth Walker III, right? He might be out this week with an ankle sprain. I'm not sure if that's 100% at this point, but I feel like that puts a lot of pressure, Jared, on your boy, Geno Smith, and the pass game, who's been playing really well all season. They're fifth best. They have the fifth best scoring offense in the league this season. Would you agree with Tank? You like the over in a spot like this?
So it's hovering right around that key total of 44. So I'd want to be on the right side of that 44, right? You know, that's the most landed on total in the NFL over the last, couple of decades there. So the 44 is key. If you're going to bet over, I would bet over 44 and I would stay away from 44.5. I understand Seattle's defense has taken a dip. You know, they've had an interesting roller coaster of a season. It started out bad. Then the middle weeks, they were great, almost like a top 10, top 15 type unit. And then over the last 4 weeks, since week 10, their bottom 5 unit. Carolina's defense is second in efficiency during that stretch.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a little bit the line movement here. I mean, listen, the look ahead last week was 7. And it opened 6.5 over at Superbook back on Sunday. And since then, it has been a steady diet of Carolina money from 6.5 to 6, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 4, now at 3.5. If it gets down to 3, my guess is just based off of the market, that's where the Seattle money will likely step in. But listen, this is an interesting spot for Seattle. Tank mentioned the NFC West vibes. Of course, the Niners now a little more vulnerable. Well, guess who plays the Niners next week on Thursday, no less. Short week, home game for Seattle at home against the Niners next Thursday. So we'll see what those look ahead vibes are. We'll see how much, Geno and the offense is focused on this game with that huge game looming in just 4 days time. So that's an interesting little nuance to this one. And the running game for Seattle really went into the tank after Kenneth Walker got hurt. DJ Dallas was not running at that same level. I think he was under 4 yards per carry. So if the running game is no bueno with Walker out, the Panthers defense clearly the better unit here. I think that explains the move, especially with Seattle. Their biggest game of the year, frankly, is next Thursday. So this is going to be an interesting spot for them.
Speaking of the team that Seattle's going to be playing next Thursday, the 49ers, the Bucs, head west this week for their matchup with San Francisco, and Tampa Bay narrowly escaped the Saints last week. They were down 16-3 with 3 minutes and 23 seconds left in the game. Tom Brady showed why, hey, I decided to come back into the league because this is what I can still do at 45 years old, however old he is. The Niners won over the Dolphins, but that came at a price. Jimmy G broke his foot, out the rest of the season. Now rookie Brock Purdy, he looked Purdy last week. He finished up the job for their team, but making his first career start. You guys want to know something fun? He's the 8th quarterback to make his first career start against Tom Brady. The previous 7 have all lost that game against Tom Brady. Do you think, Tank, that trend continues today with a guy like Brock Purdy starting under center, his first career start as a young dude in the league? They're laying 3.5 points in this spot.
I feel in any other circumstance, a young quarterback having his first start against Tom Brady, and you just assume that whoever team, like whatever team Tom Brady's playing for, like they're gonna walk the dog all over that rookie quarterback. But this is a different animal just for the fact that he gets to play with the San Francisco 49ers defense, which is one of the most imposing units in the league. And the way
Mm-hmm.
that we've seen the Tampa Bay Buccaneers function on offense this entire season, like it's hard to just break it up to how they played in the beginning of the season, middle of the season, like where we are right now. Like it's kind of been all bad the entire season. Like there's been no consistency whatsoever. And they have the playmakers. Like people are healthy right now. Besides that offensive line, maybe that's the issue. I'm not sure, but they're
Yeah.
not running the ball effectively. Tom Brady was missing wide open wide receivers deep down the field. Admittedly, so he's like, man, there's some throws I would like to have back. And until they can connect on some of those plays consistently, I don't think I can have faith in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it's hard to try to all of a sudden, just kind of build up some faith in them when they're facing against the San Francisco 49ers. So I would look for that
Mm-hmm.
Niners defense to try to suppress their points. And then when you flip it over, you have a young Brock Purdy. We can't even say his nickname on the show, but that had Twitter just going up over the weekend. But you have Brock Purdy, and he's going against a Todd Bowles defense that's going to have at least one
Yeah.
full week of tape to study and break down him and actually game plan for him. So I would expect the 49ers offense to kind of be suppressed because of that. So even though you see this really low number of 37.5, like if I was going to play this anyway, it would probably be the under, but I think this may be a game that I just don't want to mess with.
Yeah, this is one of those ones. I will say, though, if trends are your friend, Tank, the under is cashed in 7 of Tampa Bay's last 8 games, and it's also cashed in 14 of San Francisco's last 20 games. So trends are your friend. That under trend is looking pretty good at this point. Jared, do you feel like a guy like Brock Purdy, who does have so many pieces around him, could come out and have a little bit of success against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Or do you kind of, think, hey, it's Tom Brady. This guy's been in the league. He's the GOAT. Like he's going to get it done against the 49ers.
Yeah, I definitely do not subscribe to the latter line of thinking. that doesn't sound like something I would say on the
Unsubscribe.
show, right? Yeah, I don't think I've uttered the word GOAT in my 2 years of doing Pickswise Playbook. I'm gonna other than right now. I don't think I'm gonna keep that word out of my vernacular. I'm gonna try. I mean, listen, Tom. He
Perfect.
is that
Sounds
word.
good.
But this doesn't look like a Tampa team that has a lot of juice right now, right? And we've seen it at times. Like we've seen their moments. Like they've had these moments late in games against the Rams, obviously in that game on Monday night against the Saints, where he looks like Tom, right? He's his fiery self and he's putting the ball where it needs to be. But I just think overall, there's just something off about this Tampa Bay team. Maybe it's the sideline. Maybe it's Bruce Arians in the box and not on the sideline calling plays and doing his usual thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of, based on my Twitter timeline on Monday night, like Todd Bowles needed to be fired immediately. And, we needed to see like a Madden, a 10-year-old, 15-year-old kid playing Madden make the decisions on both sides of the field. So it does seem like there's just a little bit, it's just a step slow, a step off. Everything's a little bit out of rhythm. It's funny you mentioned the Tom Brady rookie quarterback statistic, making first starts, et cetera, et cetera. How about this little nugget for you? Tom Brady has only been an underdog to a rookie quarterback once in his entire career until this game.
Wow.
The only other time was way back in 2006 against the Tennessee Titans and Vince Young. And that was like a week 18 or week 17 game that didn't really matter. And I think probably the Patriots were resting a bunch of starters in that game because Vince Young and the Titans were favored and the Patriots won that game. It was a game where Vinny Testaverde also played and threw a touchdown pass, my favorite Jets quarterback of all time. But that's neither here nor there. It has nothing to do with this specific game. I think Brock's going to be fine. I heard all the rumblings about Baker Mayfield to the Niners this week. That made absolutely no sense to me.
Right.
Brock Purdy makes a ton more sense here. Again, this is a guy that's been in the system since April. He was the final pick in the draft. So You want to talk about a guy that was probably so excited to be in camp in April. He probably studied that playbook up top to bottom, left, right, and center. Like, anything I can do, coach. Thank you for drafting me last overall. And when it comes to Kyle Shanahan, it's all about the scheme. I mean, I'm convinced if I learned that scheme, I could go out there and complete 55, 60% against a too high shell defense that's going to give me certain spots, and Kyle's going to scheme it out perfectly. So that's what the Bucs play. They don't, they really like to drop back in zone. And I do think that Brock's going to have some success here. And I think the fact that the Niners are favored in this spot tells you that they think positively. The market feels like he's going to have some success here. I would not be betting the Bucs. Not with Tristan Wirfs out and with Nick Bosa there on the right side. We saw what that did to the Dolphins' offensive line and their efficiency on Sunday. If Wirfs is out and Brady's going to have pressure in his face with this Niners front, I could not get to the window on Tampa Bay in this game at all.
I mean, a guy like Brock Purdy's being plugged into an offense that has so many freaking pieces around him that it's like almost hard to fail when you're put into that spot.
Yeah.
And then when you're added up with, the number one defense in the NFL, only giving up less than 16 points per game, it could be a good recipe for a win. Also, the Bucs are 1-7-1 against the spread in their last 9 games too. So if you like the Niners laying the points and you like the trends, that might be one for you to take. The Dolphins also heading west to take on the Los Angeles Chargers. Dolphins laying 3 points in the spot bet total set at 52.5. This is the third Sunday Night Football game for the Chargers this season. They're hoping this one is different than the other ones because they lost last week to the Raiders. Now they need a win. They need to win probably 4 of their last 5, if not win out, to make the playoffs at this point, right? Like, they're kind of teetering a line. The Dolphins right now are hunting for their first AFC's title. They lost to San Fran last week. I feel like it's easy to like the Dolphins laying points here. Take on if you agree with me. The Chargers are in the bottom third of the league. The Dolphins are in the top third of the league. I feel like the Chargers are going to have a really hard time stopping Miami's offense and what they've been able to do so far this season. Would you feel comfortable laying the points on the road, them being a road favorite in LA?
So this is another game where I look at the motivations of the teams coming in, and you have the Dolphins coming off a tough loss to the San Francisco 49ers, but yet and still the Chargers were going into a game against the Raiders where they were favored. But the Raiders, they've been on this hot streak and the heater continues. Like, Josh Jacobs ran the ball down their throat because the Chargers can't stop the run, and the Raiders came out of there with the win. And so now you have 2 motivated teams who are like scrapping for their playoff lives coming into this matchup. And so I think this is going to be a highly competitive game. As you stated, I believe the Miami Dolphins can score pretty much on any team as long as they can protect Tua. I mean, it was weird watching Tua last week because there were so many errant throws that we're not accustomed to seeing. Like, I had a vision that they were going to try to get the ball out of his hands quickly. We saw in the first play of the game they did that, and it led to a touchdown. And I felt that if they can execute on those types of plays consistently, they had a chance to get the San Francisco 49ers. But there's so many throws where he was a little bit higher or a little bit off, and I'm not sure if he was just not in the zone last week or not feeling it. But I feel like whatever we saw against the 49ers and whatever led to that inaccuracy and just not the execution that we're accustomed to seeing from the Miami Dolphins, we won't see that against the Los Angeles Chargers. So I feel pretty comfortable about Miami being able to execute and score a lot of points against the Chargers. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to see out of the Chargers, and more specifically Mike Williams if he plays. I believe that if they can get him back and you add him to Keelan Allen, you have Austin Eckler and all these other pieces, and then this can be a potential shootout that I believe that's the reason why you want to see these 2 teams play each other, because it can be that exciting watching them go back and forth because you're really not scared of these 2 defenses. Do I know who's going to win this game? Absolutely not, because we've already talked about, it probably too much that the Chargers are going to Charger. And so if you feel it's a game that they should win, they're going to probably keep it close and lose. And if it's a game that you feel like they probably should lose, they're going to probably keep it close and maybe actually pull out a win. And so with that being said, am I going to put it on the Dolphins, the cover or something like that? Nah, but that over 51.5, 52 at this point, yeah, I dig it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you said, this could be a shootout going back and forth in the first half. And I just feel like maybe the Chargers will charge her and let it slip away in the second half. Slowly or quickly, I don't know. But I just feel like the Dolphins' offense is a little bit too much for the Chargers to be able to handle for the full game. Jared, how do you feel this one plays out?
Yeah, I want to echo Tank's sentiments on Tua last week. I mean, I kind of had a feeling once both starting tackles were out that Mike McDaniel was going to go against tendency, really, because the tendency for this Dolphins offense this year has been to throw the ball deep down the field. You know, you've got the two studs, Waddle and Hill, and, you know, try to attack deep middle. That's kind of been their MO this year. But once those two tackles went out, I kind of had a feeling it was going to be more the dink and dunk short passing game. And to Mike McDaniel's credit, it was working early in the game. And you saw some quick throws to the edges that were really solving this Niners defense, because the Niners' strength of their defense is really their coverage linebackers. Greenlaw and Werner, two of the best covered linebackers in the league. So stay away from the middle, which is what the Dolphins tended to attack. But Tua 15% below expectation on his completion percentage. So that like when you're not accurate throwing the football, you can't throw to the edges outside the hash marks. It's impossible. Like, you have to be accurate on those throws, and Tua wasn't. This week, he gets a much softer Chargers defense, and I think that's going to be really the MO here. Can Tua bounce back and show you that, hey, listen, tough matchup, both starting tackles out. We'll see what Jackson and Armstead's status are. I think Armstead's going to be out for a significant period of time. Jackson might return, so we'll see which if they do get him back, that's huge. And on the other side for the Chargers, I mean, their entire right side of the offensive line's out. Pimpkins and Johnson, and then the center, Lindsey. And then all of a sudden you throw in this Dolphins defense, which 6 sacks last week against the good offensive line. And, I know it was Purdy and not Jimmy G for most of the game, but still 6 sacks against the good Niners team. I think that's positive. So to me, it's the Dolphins getting pressure on Herbert. Obviously, Mike Williams being back would be absolutely huge. Total steaming up there through that key total of 51 is big. So I think now clearly the sharp money, like the over early. We'll see if it bounces back a little bit more to the under now that we've gone through that key number. But I see points here as long as the Chargers offensive line can hold up enough, especially if Mike Williams is back. I think the over is a good angle in this game.
Yeah, and the trends, like right now, the under is 12-2 in the last 14 meetings. So if they see the total so high, the under might be bet down a little bit more. The over could be a good call in this spot. Let's get into some key divisional matchups. We have quite a few of these bad boys this week. We have the Ravens taking on the Steelers. First of all, this opened up with the Ravens laying the points. Now, obviously, with the Lamar Jackson news, the Steelers are laying 2.5 points. I know it's a thing that Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season in the NFL. The Steelers, guys, started out at 2-6 this year. Somehow, some way, Mike Tomlin might still finish 500 or over. They're 5-7 so far in the season. He might be able to keep that stretch going. And then Baltimore lost Lamar Jackson last week. He has a PCL tear. He's going to be out 1 to 3 weeks at this point. So who steps up? Tyler Huntley, right? Is it wrong of me to say, with the way that the Steelers have been playing over the last couple of weeks, that they might still have a shot at the playoffs at this point? I don't know. Like, the Steelers have had the Ravens number, and they've had Tyler Huntley's number. Tank, do you feel they're coming into this game as favorites now at home? They could maybe get this win against a guy like Tyler Huntley, who, isn't Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, this one's interesting. We know that Lamar is not going to play. And I think the quote that Mike Tomlin gave about George Pickens really speaks to who the Steelers are as a whole. This dude said that I would rather say whoa than sick 'em. And if you need me to break that down for you, that means that Mike Tomlin wants some damn dogs on this team. He don't want some people that you have to be like, hey, I want you to play up to these expectations. Like, I want you to be like, hey, coach, I'm not really feeling it right now. He want to be like, hey, like, give me the damn ball. I feel like I can go help the team win. Or, hey, that guy shouldn't be out there. I should be in there because I'm going to go get that sack. I'm going to go get that interception. And that's the mindset that the Steelers are playing with right now. And that's why they've won 2 games in a row. And so now you have a divisional matchup where you're playing against a Baltimore Ravens team that lost their starting quarterback yet again. Tyler Huntley has to come in. He's played good in spurts, but at the same time, we've seen even when the Ravens were healthier this year, regardless of who they play, what do? They always play their competition close. And so I don't expect anything to change in this matchup as well. And so with those 2 teams being divisional rivals, probably going to play a competitive game, I feel, to me, not knowing who's going to win this game, the under feels the most comfortable, even though it's set at 38. But with the Pittsburgh Steelers defense improving, with the Baltimore Ravens defense improving, and with these 2 young quarterbacks who you don't expect one to go out and just kind of just murder the other team, I feel like that would be the most comfortable play for me, is the under in this matchup.
Yeah, a guy like Tyler Huntley. I mean, this is a repeat of the matchup that we saw in Week 18 of last year. He went 16 of 31 passing for 141 yards, 2 picks, and the Steelers won with the shell of what was Ben Roethlisberger. Now they have Kenny Pickett under center, who's been playing pretty well recently, Jared. Who do you lean sidewise in this spot? Or are you more looking at the total?
I did write up Ravens +3 for the site this week. That play will be on Pickswise probably Wednesday night, Thursday morning. So I think the lines moved a little too much. There were some interesting circumstances again with that game last year in Week 18. So it was the Pittsburgh Steelers needed to win to get into the playoffs, and the Ravens had nothing to play for other than pride. But in this division, pride matters a lot. And that game went to overtime. And it was a tight game, and the Steelers won it, and they got into the playoffs, and then they lost to the Chiefs in the wildcard round the following week in blowout. So I think Huntley will be fine, honestly. And Lamar Jackson's numbers over the last couple of weeks don't tell you that he was lighting the world on fire. And maybe the injury was already there, and it just kind of was aggravated on Sunday, and maybe he's been playing a little bit dinged up for the last few weeks, and that's why his productivity and his accuracy has kind of taken a sharp decline over the last month. But the market's telling us here with the Ravens at 5 on the look ahead last week, and now 2.5, really 3 at one point as an underdog, it's telling you that Tyler Huntley is worth over a touchdown on the spread compared to Lamar Jackson. I think it's more like 6 based off of the numbers that I'm looking at, more like 6 or 6.5. So I think we're getting a little bit of value here on Baltimore as the home underdog. I mean, listen, it's kind of obvious what the game plan is going to be. The Steelers play some of the highest rates of man coverage in the NFL, and the Ravens have faced some of the highest rates of man coverage in the NFL because it's really tough to play zone against Lamar Jackson. He'll just run on you all day. So I think we're going to see a ton of man coverage here, and it's all about if Tyler Huntley can diagnose it properly and make a few throws to stay in this game. Since trading for Roquan Smith, the Ravens defense is the top 5 unit since week 9. They're top 5 against the run. They're not letting you run it down their throats, which is what they were kind of doing early in the season, very anti-Ravens-like. Since the bye in also week 9 for Kenny Pickett, that's where kind of the evolution has come. 3-1 straight up. The only loss was against the Bengals, and that was a game where the Steelers led at half. They scored 30 points. Obviously, the offense wasn't at fault for that game. In weeks 5 through 8, Pickett's first 4 starts in the NFL, offense 28th in efficiency. Since week 10, after that bye week, in week 10, the offense is a top 10 unit. So maybe it's the bye, getting a little more comfortable. Clearly, we've seen some of the other pieces around Pickens come along. I think this offensive line's playing better for the Steelers. But at the end of the day, this is a Ravens-Steelers game, and I'm getting 7.5 points of value from the look ahead. I know it's a different quarterback, but I think Tyler Huntley can do enough to keep Baltimore in this game. And if you can get the full 3, it is a stone cold bet. At 2.5, it's a smaller play, but I still think the Ravens are a little bit undervalued in this spot.
The road team is 8-3 against the spread in their last 11 games, so that trend favors our boy Jared. Let's head to Cincy, where you can get 2 things this weekend. Number 1, Skyline Chili. Number 2, the Browns in town to take on your Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals right now laying just under a touchdown, 6.5 points. That total is set at 47.5. The Bengals, guys, one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now. They have 4 straight wins after losing to the Browns on Halloween, including their 3rd win against the Kansas City Chiefs in this calendar year. Now they're going up against the Browns, so they lost to, again, on Halloween. This time, new look. They have Deshaun Watson under center starting for a 2nd straight game. And the Browns won last week, but no thanks to Deshaun Watson. The defense had 3 touchdowns to help them get the win against the Texans. And guys, I know I always mention fantasy just once, but my dad has the Browns defense, and he goes, no way they put up 40 points on fantasy last week for it, which is absolutely wild. It is wild. Yeah. But the Browns blew out the Bengals on Halloween. Since then, the Bengals are averaging 6.2 yards per play. Tank, do you think, as a former player, when you're blown out by a team that's not as good as you are extremely hungry coming into that second matchup, especially with it being a division rivalry?
See, now we get to flip it. Because I've been saying, like, the Cincinnati Bengals don't give a damn about any other team's revenge, but do they give a damn about their own? Because they let the Browns go in there and handle business against them early in the season.
Yeah.
And now they have Jamar Chase back. Now they're riding the type of heater that Jared was on before last week, where they can't be stopped. I'm really interested to see how the Bengals like attack the Browns in this matchup because I mean we've talked about a lot of quarterbacks this season: Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Tua, Jalen Hurts, and rightfully so for all of them because they've been playing extremely well. But the way that Joe Burrow's been playing over this past couple of weeks, and then also look at what he's saying. Like he gets in front of the camera after the game, and he was like, let me just tell you straight up, like this is December. This is where teams have to define what they're going to do and try to make that playoff push, and that's the only thing we're worried about right now. And when he said that, that reminded me of the days where Brady was like in his zone and in New England. That reminded me of Peyton Manning back in the day. That reminded me of playing with Steve McNair. And so it seems like, man, that synergy that Joe Burrow has with this team, with everyone just kind of like, whether it's coming, I mean, I'm sure it's coming down from Zach Taylor all the way down through that team, but all of them have the same priority, the same focus, and they're riding this damn wave right now. And I feel like it's about to crash down over the Browns because even though they're able to go in Houston and pull out a win, there's still some dysfunction with that program. I mean, Deshaun Watson is still trying to get his feet wet. Surprisingly, I felt the Browns would be able to run the ball more effectively against a Houston Texans team that's given up the most rushing yards in the league. Nick Chubb didn't have a touchdown. I think he only had about 80 rushing yards, something like that. And so now you have a team that's kind of teetering on offense. The defense played better, give them that, but they played against the Texans as well. How are they going to do it against a motivated Cincinnati Bengals team? That remains to be seen. And so, man, I feel in this one, if Deshaun can get his act together and score some points against the Cincinnati Bengals defense, then I like the over because I have zero words about Joe Burrow and that offense putting up points on the Cleveland Browns. And I think this is the perfect setup to where you see the Browns go and you ball out against the Houston Texans. And so everyone's like, hey, that Browns defense is back. They're legit. We don't have this divisional matchup. Like, I think Burrow and those boys are going to come out on fire. You have a Browns defense that's susceptible against the run. So whether you have Joe Mixon or Samaje Perine back, they can run the ball, and we already know they can throw the ball. Man, give me the over in this one because I feel like that Cincinnati Bengals offense is hard to stop right now, and I don't see a team in the league that can try to stop them at this point.
You talk about Joe Burrow being like, yeah, it's November, yeah, it's December. His O-line, he's like, say louder for the people in the back because his O-line is, man, they've shaped up so far the last few weeks after having a really rough start to the season. Like, Jared, the first game, Burrow was sacked 7 times. Over the last 3 weeks, they've only allowed him to be sacked on 3.6% of his dropbacks, which is 6th best in the NFL over that stretch. I know 6.5 points is a lot, but the way that Deshaun Watson played last week, if he plays like this again, there's no chance for the Browns, right? How do you look at this line and what side do you kind of favor here?
Yeah, remember a few minutes ago when I said nothing would surprise me in the NFL anymore?
Mm-hmm.
I think it would surprise me if the Browns win this game. I think that actually I would be surprised. I would be surprised if the Browns win this game. Even though the line's kind of telling you that they're going to be in it, right? Like there's bigger favorites on the board this week. There's one favorite that's so big it's the biggest line of the year. But this look ahead was 3.5, and since it reopened 3.5, I mean, you can see that line at the bottom of your screen. Obviously, it's been one-way traffic towards Cincinnati since. Explain to me this, friends. Explain to me this. Joe Burrow's 3-0 against the Chiefs and 0-4 against the Browns. I don't know. I don't understand.
Hey, divisional games, dog. It's a different animal.
It's true.
It's a different animal.
It's true. Especially in-state divisional games, right? I mean, these teams are separated by like a stone's throw across, I don't know, whatever road connects Cleveland and Cincinnati. But there's really not much to this game if the Bengals bow up defensively. Like, to me, if they play the way that they played last week, coming up with some big stops and forcing a key turnover in the second half, and Lou Anarumo shutting down Derrick Henry 2 weeks ago, I mean, just completely taking him out of the game, right? Like, if that's what we see this week and they have a good game plan to stop Chubb and Hunt and this very good Browns rushing offense, I mean, you saw Deshaun Watson last week. He looked slow. He looked a little bit just woozy. Like, it didn't look good. And that was the handicap. That's why we bet the Texans +7. Unfortunately, the Browns scored 3 defensive and special teams touchdowns, and we lost by 1 score. So I felt like I made a really solid handicap in that game, and I feel pretty solid about my vibes on Deshaun and that he's not going to look like Deshaun Watson of old, not anytime soon, maybe not even for the rest of the season. It takes a while. He hasn't played in 2 years. But let's give him some time, right, before we expect him to look like the Deshaun Watson of old. So I think it's really just a simple, can the Bengals stop this Browns rushing attack? And if so, probably name your price for Cincinnati, right? Because their offense has been great and the Browns defense can't stop a nosebleed.
Yeah.
I mean, they had trouble in the second half against Kyle Allen last week, and they were moving. I thought we had a chance at that back door, even though the Browns defense scored 3 freaking times. Don't even get me started on how many holes in my wall I punched during that game. But I think it's Cincinnati or pass, but the number's probably been extracted any value. They're not going to get any value at Cincinnati -6, but I would be surprised if the Bengals lost this game.
And a trend that favors Tank. The over is 7-1-2 in the last 10 meetings between these two teams. So something to keep in mind. Let's head on up to Buffalo, where the JET has Jets in town for an AFC East showdown. The Jets underwent a quarterback change a couple weeks ago. Narrow loss to the Vikings last week. Mike White's 2 interceptions were extremely costly in that game, but the dude still threw for 369 yards, but no touchdowns. The Bills, they've won 3 straight. They're figuring it out. They have back-to-back Thursday wins over Detroit and the Pats. But right now, they got news this morning that Von Miller actually has a torn ACL after he underwent surgery. He's going to be out the rest of the season. We've seen that line move from the Bills laying 9.5 to now the Bills only laying only 7. They're still laying a touchdown, but they're laying 7 points now in this spot. Tank, I know the Jets are hungry. I know they're motivated. I know they love Mike White at this point, but the Buffalo Bills are still the Buffalo Bills. Would you feel comfortable laying a touchdown with them at home, especially with maybe some weather on the way too?
I love the way you phrased that by saying the Buffalo Bills are still the Buffalo Bills, because when we talk about the NFL, we have to talk about this year, not years past. And the Buffalo Bills this year, even though they still have a lot of dogs on offense and they have some guys on defense, I mean, they really haven't played that consistently. And we've seen that any team can beat any team on any given Sunday. The Detroit Lions showed us that against the Buffalo Bills just a couple of weeks ago. And this is a New York Jets team that we can talk about the turnovers that Mike White had and how, I mean, I think every one of us at least had like a little inkling that maybe they can go into Minnesota and pull off a win. They weren't able to get it done. Yet if you watch that game, I mean, Braxton Berrios, I mean, the ball was right there. If he just catches that ball, more than likely the Jets win that game, and it's a completely different narrative.
Too soon.
You know what I'm saying, dog? But for real, it's a completely different narrative going into this game. And so
that game, they're going to write songs about that Vikings cover one day. I have no idea how the Vikings. I'll get into some numbers when we do the Vikings segment, but I don't know how the hell they covered that game. That was just beyond my comprehension.
Yeah. I mean, so Mike White, I mean, I still like him. I mean, I think he can still ball in this league. Garrett Wilson is a damn dog on the outside. Like, that dude is a beast, and he's an issue to deal with, for opposing defenses. That dude, Bam Knight, I mean, he got some juice. I understand. There's some guys talking about like Robert Saleh saying man, he's juicy when he runs. And people are like, man, I'm not going to talk about a dude being juicy when he runs. But then when he struck out down the sideline, I'm like, oh yeah, dude got some juice now. And so when you look at some of these weapons that the Jets have, I don't really see this as a game where you can just say that, hey, it's the Buffalo Bills. They're playing at home. They're definitely going to get some revenge for that loss against the Jets earlier this season. I think the Jets are going to come in motivated as hell, saying that there was a game against a 8-2, 9-2 team, wherever the Vikings were at that time, that we should have won. We let one get away. We're still in this playoff hunt. We need to go ahead and get another win against a divisional rival. So, I mean, definitely at that -9.5, I was like, man, you should probably be on the Jets with the motivation they have coming in here. At the 7, if you really believe in the Jets, I'm like, maybe you mess with that. But I think, me, I like to mess with the totals more than anything else. And for me, I like the over because I feel like the Jets can definitely score on the Bills. I mean, there's been a number of teams that scored on the Bills, and then we know what that Bills offense could do on the other side, so give me the over.
I mean, absolutely. Let me take you back to week 7, Jared, or maybe, you were celebrating that one. The Jets beat the Bills as an 11-point home underdog in that game. They've shown that they can do it. Now they have Mike White under center. But the Bills defense, they're 4th in the NFL, 3rd against the run. And I know the Jets in that game relied a lot on the run game. Guess who's not in their lineup right now? Breece Hall, right? And then you look at Mike White. He's now on the road. Last week he attempted 57 passes. He's not going to be able to do that again, right? Against a Bills defense that is top 4 in the NFL. Do you feel comfortable taking the points with your Jets team, or do you feel like this is a Bills revenge game coming back from week 7?
Yeah, this one's a tough one. So the line, I'm not seeing 7. I'm still seeing 9.5. I think that's kind of where we've been hovering for most of the week. It's kind of bounced around both to be honest with you. Once it got to 10, then it, kind of got bought back down to
LOL,
9.
Jared. I was literally looking at the Bills game next week on FanDuel and DraftKings. You idiot, Lauren. Hate when you type in a name and it comes up a week in advance. It is still 9.5. That's on me. But they are still without Von Miller. So 9.5. Yeah, 9.5.
Correct. I have not seen a tick up or down since the Von Miller news. I mean, he was already out, so it wasn't like they were expecting him to play this week. But I do agree. So here's where I'm at with Buffalo. And here, you want to call it a hot take, I really don't care. You want to put it on Twitter and get me yelled at by all the Twitter trolls, that's fine too. Not a first or a last time for that. But I think the Buffalo Bills lost their chance of winning a Super Bowl or even playing in the Super Bowl today. And today being Wednesday, the day that Von Miller was announced that he's out for the year with an ACL. I watched the early season games with him, go back and watch that Rams game. I know that was a revenge game, but still, watch the way that game played out and the amount of pressure and what it did to the Rams offense in that game. The Rams were fully healthy in that game too, so you could say that the Rams that we know now is not that same Rams team from week 1. But what Von Miller brought to the Bills was an element that they did not have last year, which is a killer instinct pass rusher. Von Miller and Leonard Floyd on the edge last year for the Rams is why they won that Super Bowl. They disrupted things. They were down. They were losing that game. Matthew Stafford was throwing interceptions. That game was over. And then all of a sudden, Miller, Floyd, and also obviously Aaron Donald ratcheted up the intensity in the second half. Burrow couldn't get anything. Pressure, sacks. I mean, the sack ended the game, frankly. And I really thought Aaron Donald should have been MVP in that game, but that's okay. The quarterback usually gets the love, or the offense usually gets the love, right, Tank? Offense always gets the love. It's never the defense. Of course. But I think in this particular case, the defense needs to be like in the forefront of the Bills' Super Bowl hopes. And I honestly think I'm very sour on the Bills now, long term, after the Von Miller injury. What does it mean for this game? I could see Buffalo having more success against the Jets offense, at least more success than they had in the last game where they scored 20. I know it's not a lot, but for Buffalo's defense, that's slightly above their average. Divisional underdogs of a touchdown or more have been fantastic this year. That's been the trend. 71%, 10-4 against the spread. Of course, that includes that Jets outright home win. They were a 10.5-point underdog in that game, and they won it by a field goal. Jets offensive line's been in flux all year, and it will be in flux again this week. Max Mitchell, it was announced today that non-football injury will not play this week. That will likely kick George Fant back to right tackle, and you'll have Dwayne Brown at left tackle. That's not a really great tackle tandem to be facing this Bills defense, especially if Mike White, struggles a little bit with his timing. And I thought the first half was disjointed, but the second half they really got going. They outgained Minnesota by a ton, but they couldn't get the finishing play, the one play that they needed to make in that game. It eluded them time in and time out. I think the Jets defense has to play better this week, even though they did a good job last week. They held the Vikings to 27 points, and this Vikings offense has been pretty good this year, and they held Justin Jefferson in check in the first half. So I think the Jets defense will hold up their end of the bargain. The question is, can the Jets offense on the road, maybe there's weather, make that play to win them this game? I think they'll probably keep it close. I like that. If I was going to bet this game, I would take 9. That's for sure. I would not lay it with Buffalo. But I feel a little bit, after risking my reputation betting my home team last week and then coming up short, I feel a little skittish getting to the window on or against them this week. I'll just root for them and hope for the best, because this is a Jets team I think that can make the playoffs, no doubt.
Hope that they're better than 1-6 in the red zone that they were last week against the Vikings. Sorry to twist the knife, Jared. Sorry to twist the knife. Let's take it to the other city.
Sorry, not sorry.
He's not sorry.
We got the
never
Eagles
sorry.
taking on the Giants. The Eagles laying just under a touchdown, 6.5 points. That total is set at 44.5. NFC East rivalry heating up. The Eagles crushed the Titans last week. A.J. Brown went off 119 yards, 2 touchdowns on 8 receptions. The Giants and the Commanders showed a loss for us all. I hate ties in the NFL. I hate ties more than anything in the NFL. We got to see a 20-20 tie game between two average teams in the National Football League. But Daniel Jones did look pretty good. He completed 80.6% of his pass attempts. Saquon Barkley had 81 yards, 1 touchdown. I feel like, Tank, the Giants are slumping at the wrong time. They haven't won a game since November 13th. And now they're going up against the Eagles, who are absolutely on fire. Philly ranks second in scoring, 28.2 points per game, and third in total yards per game. And right now, the Giants are giving up 5.1 yards per carry on the year, which is 30th in the NFL. Do they have any hope being a road or a home dog against the Philadelphia Eagles, who are 11-1 so far, and they could clinch a playoff berth with a win in this game?
So the two leads for both of these teams is this, and we already mentioned it on the Philadelphia side, like AJ Brown not only firing up the Titans cornerbacks, but then getting the dude fired that wears a tie like 2 days later. Like that cannot get old. I don't care. We can be like a few weeks removed from that, and that would still be a story to me. Because just like that, like I just imagine AJ Brown just walking up to the microphone like Silky Johnson
Yeah, and
on
just
Dave
saying,
Chappelle, just hate, because he knew what was about to go down in Tennessee when you have a performance like that against your former team. And he messed around and got this dude fired. Like, I still cannot believe it. And then on the flip side, we talked about this Giants Commanders game going into it last week. And what did I say? I was like, I don't trust the Commanders because this is a divisional game. Everything was trending towards them being able to dominate this game, but it's a divisional matchup against the Giants, and something just tells you that both of these teams are going to hang around, and you don't know who the hell is going to win the game, and then, damn, none of them won the damn game. But this is a different animal. Like, this is a division game, so you expect these teams to possibly play each other close, but everything still remains the same for the Giants. Like, they give up a lot of big plays in the run. They're not that good with their passing game. They give up a lot of sacks. And then you look at this Philadelphia Eagles team that's like second in the league in sacks, only behind the Cowboys. You look at this Philadelphia Eagles team that's one of the better running teams in the league and have like this master chess piece that pretty much no one else in the league has, and Jalen Hurts, where if you want to add an extra blocker to the mix, then you can have Jalen Hurts run the ball down your throat. He can run for damn near 150 yards in the first half. So if there's any game where I feel like it's a divisional matchup, but then the one that's favored should go out there and dominate the opponent, it's probably this one. That being said, it's the NFC East, and I still don't trust any teams in the NFL because the parity is real. So I don't know if I can just trust any team with, even though you told us that we should be on the Cowboys last week, didn't you? So maybe I just need to go ahead and get some chutzpah and say, yeah, the Eagles are going to do it. Like I wouldn't put the
they
money
are
on the
going to do
Eagles,
it.
but if it's any game where I'm looking at it out there right now where it's like, hey, like the Eagles should be able to cover this based on who they're playing and what that team has looked like over the past month, it should be the Eagles over the Giants.
I will say the Eagles are 9-2 straight up, Jared, in their last 11 games against the Giants, but the Giants are 5-1 against the spread against teams with a winning record this season. So which trend do you favor here?
Oh, it's tough. So first of all, the total here seems a little elevated for me. Divisional unders have been the trend, right? That's really the trend. 36-22 this year. That's over 60%. And when you look at what the Eagles, like I thought, like the Titans were a very sharp play last week. Multiple groups that we coerce with, Todd Furman and his Bet the Board crew, they really liked the Titans last week. Multiple other respected professional bettors all over the Titans moved that number down from 6. It closed right around 4. And it was it was the wrong side. See, there you go. See, the sharp money can be wrong too.
Well, we talked about that going into the game too. Like the Philadelphia Eagles, they give a damn about revenge. Like they do.
Yeah,
like we saw Nick Sirianni in Indianapolis. So you knew the AJ revenge game was going to be real, and boy, was it.
Yeah, it was the dead nuts wrong side. Tennessee didn't have a chance in that game. And I was curious because it's really been an interesting couple of weeks for the Titans. And I wanted to go back. I dug into that game a little bit of that Eagles-Titans game. And I was so impressed with Jonathan Gannon. Like we were a little critical of him earlier in the season. We thought the Eagles defense maybe was underperforming a little bit. I went back and I watched some of the, the running approach to the, how they stopped Derrick Henry in that game. And it was damn impressive. So Henry saw 8 in the box on almost 50% of snaps, which, I know that makes sense, right? But then you're really leaving yourself open on the back end, and the Titans are used to 8 in the box. So it's about how you disguise coverages when you have 8 in the box. And I thought Tennessee had, like, Ryan Tannehill looked confused that entire game. And the Eagles did this very unique thing where they kind of showed you too high and they were in dime for most of the game, especially when they had that extra guy in the box floating. And when they brought the safety up, like they would like change, like they disguised their coverages really well. I won't get into the weeds with it too much because our audience probably has no idea what the hell I'm talking about. But they made it really, really difficult for Ryan Tannehill to diagnose what was going on. And translation, if they stop the run like they did this week against Saquon Barkley, and they make Daniel Jones try to diagnose those coverages. I mean, if Ryan Tannehill's been in the league for over a decade, seen every defensive scheme you could probably ask for, if he can't figure it out, Daniel Jones has absolutely no shot to diagnose Jonathan Gannon's scheme. So if Gannon brings the same level of quality to his defensive game plan this week, I don't see how the Giants score a lot of points in this game. And I think the under would be the way I would play it. 44.5. Again, it's over that key total of 44. That's that, dividing line that we like to talk about. So as long as this total is over 44, I think the under to me is the way to bet it, with the hope that the Eagles defense brings that level of intensity. This game's a blowout at halftime, and then they'll throttle down the offense in the second half, and we'll cruise to an under.
The total's gone under in 5 of the Giants' last 7 games against Philly, so that could be a good bet for you. Let's take it to Smashville, where the Jacksonville Jaguars in town. The Titans laying 4.5 points. That total set at 41.5. AFC South matchup. The Jags licking their wounds after getting mauled by my Detroit Lions last week. You'll love to see it. And the Titans are also in the same boat. They couldn't get done against the aforementioned Eagles last week. The Jags have not won on the road, guys, since week 3. It's been a minute, 11 minutes / 11 weeks to be exact. The Titans are on back-to-back losses, but have beaten the Jags 9 of the last 10 meetings, and they've also won 8 straight home games against the AFC South. They haven't lost to the Jags at home, Tank, since November of 2013, which is pretty crazy. Do you think that trend continues?
See, this is another game where you have to zoom out and look at the macro narratives, because we were talking about Trevor Lawrence possibly taking a step. Like, this dude looked like sunshine against the Baltimore Ravens, and then and the sun never came up against those Detroit Lions. Like, that game was ugly. And then you have a Titans team that are licking their wounds, and they need to find their identity. I believe, like, inside that locker room, like Mike Vrabel, like, is one voice, and I think the guys know the marching orders that they're stomping to. But you can tell that there was some friction between Vrabel and John Robinson, and maybe some of that trickled down towards the team, and losing a player like AJ Brown, who they felt was one of their better players, and they didn't want to retain one of their better players that they drafted. Maybe some of that threw off the chemistry within that team. I'm not sure. So maybe when you get rid of that element from the organization, maybe kind of rally together and say, hey, we're all for one another right now. Maybe that's going to be the mantra. But that being said, in order to try to right a ship and go against a divisional rival, where if you just think back to the last time, like every time the Titans play the Jaguars, what are you accustomed to seeing? Like Derrick Henry breaking off 70, 80-yard runs and just stiff-arming the hell out of people and then hitting his head on the goalpost. So is it going to be one of those get-right games where Tennessee gets back on track at home and Derrick Henry just has this blow-up game? Or the Jacksonville Jaguars actually, for real, did they actually turn the corner and Trevor Lawrence can take advantage of a Tennessee pass defense that has been one of the worst in the league? I have no idea what the hell is going to happen in this game, because we've seen the parity in this league. Like, everything changes week to week, and with it being a divisional game on top of that, I'm not going to be able to project what's going to happen. But I would say that 42.5, Jared likes to talk about those key numbers. I'm trying to get hip to your game. That sounds kind of low to me. And when you have two teams that should be motivated coming off of 2 really bad losses, maybe we get some points in this game. Maybe we get over that key number. So maybe give me the over in this one now that I kind of talk it through.
Derrick Henry, he's always solid against Jacksonville. Over the last 6, Jared, he's averaged 145 rushing yards per game and gone over 200 rushing yards twice. And he's had 12 touchdowns over those last 6 games. I know the Eagles shut him down last week. He's going to be hungry this week. And the Jags give up the 8th most rushing yards over the last 3 games, 139 yards per game. Is this a spot where King Henry can retake over, the throne? Because last week he was definitely dethroned against the Eagles.
Yeah, like we said during that Eagles-Giants handicap, I was so impressed with how Jonathan Gannon schemed up 8 in the box, but still able to stop the pass and make Ryan Tannehill really off balance. I don't know if Jacksonville's defense is going to have the same success this week. Now, I'm glad you mentioned the recent success for Henry, because overall the for the Jaguars rushing defense, because overall this season as a whole, the Jaguars actually are pretty good against the run. They're terrible against the pass, 31st in DVOA against the pass, but 13th against the run. So if you were going to ask me, do they have a fighter's chance to stop the run? Sure. Their numbers against the run this year have been good, but Derrick Henry last year in this game went off for $130 and didn't really have any issues. So we'll see what the scheme looks like. I will bring to your attention a very important practice nugget that thankfully dropped before we came on the show. Trevor Lawrence did not practice on Wednesday. It's a foot injury. Doug Peterson says day-to-day questionable. Obviously, that will throw a massive monkey wrench into this market. You would likely see that total drop significantly. I actually don't know who the Jaguars' backup is.
CJ Beathard.
But that's obviously – there you go, CJ Beathard, who actually has had a little bit of success in the NFL of late. So maybe that, won't be a dramatic drop-off like we've seen in other starting to backup situations. But obviously, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play – that's huge. The other element to this game, Mike Vrabel, back-to-back losses. 6-1-1 against the spread off 2 losses in his career. So, usually he's a coach, and we talk about his divisional record, very good, 11-7 against the number as a divisional favorite. We talk about his record as an underdog, which has also been very good until the last couple of games, right? But also, when they've lost consecutive games in a row, he's just a coach, narratively speaking, that is able to get his guys up for games, even if they're struggling, which clearly right now over the last 2 games, they've played well below odds maker expectations, especially last week, which was just, when they've lost this year, they've lost big. The game to Buffalo, the game to Philly. So I'm fascinated to see how he bounces back with his scheme and how this overall effort level is for this Titans team. But obviously the Trevor Lawrence injury is going to be the big indicator here with where this market moves. So I don't really think it makes sense to handicap this game too deeply until we know who's playing quarterback for Jacksonville, which we probably won't know now until Friday or Saturday at the absolute early.
The Jags are 0-3-1 against the spread in their last 4 road games, and that's with Trevor Lawrence. So we'll see the status of his injury at this point, but I feel like the Titans are going to be extremely hungry in this one. You've mentioned guys, Jared, that have had recent success in the league. What about teams that have had recent success? And I'm talking over the last 5 weeks. The Detroit Lions are 4-1, and their one loss was a narrow loss to the Buffalo Bills. They are home favorites, and I think rightly so, this week against the Minnesota Vikings, who are 10-2. The Vikings barely snuck by the Jets last week. They had a late goal line stand, and a lot of that was because the Jets could not figure it out in the red zone, right? And the Lions were freaking ferocious. Rawr. Last week, 40-14 win over the Jags. Jared Goff completed 21 of his 31 passes for 340 yards, 2 touchdowns. They played back in week 3. The Vikings snuck out a win at home. I feel like playing at Ford Field is going to be a different vibe for the Lions, where they're averaging almost 32 points per game at home this season, second in the NFL. Yes, the Vikings defense has stepped up. They've only allowed teams to score on 25% of red zone possessions over the last 3 weeks. But Detroit, unlike the Jets, I'm sorry, Jared, have scored on 73.4% of their red zone possessions, which is first in the NFL. You take a breath. Do you think they can cover the spread, Tank, this week?
Yo, I'm so anxious to hear Jared's viewpoint on this line because I'm I get it. I totally get it because the Detroit Lions have been playing phenomenal ball, and I'm one of the hugest Detroit fans just watching them win because we're talking about how people were trying to hate on Jared Goff early in the season, trying to say the Spider-Man meme was Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff pointing at each other because they're the same cat. No, Jared Goff isn't that cat. He's actually trying to protect the ball this year. And that damn Detroit Lions offense is just unbelievable. Jamal Williams, who everyone expected to take a backseat to DeAndre Swift, has been balling. He's one of the leaders in rushing touchdowns this season. Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the better wide receivers in the league, not just the division, but in the damn league. And now they're getting even more dogs back. Jameson Williams only played a handful of snaps, but once this dude is back and healthy and they unleash that monster on the opposing defense, it's oh my God. And so to me, it's really Vegas just really said that, all right, we have this Lions team going up against a 9-2 Viking squad. And we're just going to say that since they're playing at home and they've been competitive against a Buffalo Bills team and then they win the game last week, like we just gonna go ahead and say that they should win the game against a 9-2, like in their division. Like that to me is mind blowing because it's almost like a college football thing where you have like a lower ranked team. That's just like saying like, hey, like
Yeah.
TCU, like they've won a bunch of games this year, and so hey, we gonna just say that even though like they lost last week, we're gonna just go ahead and say that they're the number one team in the country over Georgia, who won the championship last year, and that's leading all of college football this year. I mean, it seems like Jared has always said that Vegas is always late to the game to try to adjust things, like the Atlanta Falcons, how they were like had this really great winning percentage against the spread because Vegas was late to adjust. And so now this game against the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings, this is when you want to adjust and say that the Lions are going to be favored against a 9-2 team. Like this is just mind blowing to me. So I don't know how in the hell to gauge this one. Like the only thing I can say is that I wish the total was lower so I can bet the over, because I feel like when you have a Minnesota Vikings team that gives up the amount of points that they do, that I have no qualms about the Detroit Lions scoring points. And I feel like the Vikings are going to come in motivated saying like, really? Like we can almost like lock up the division and you have us as like dogs this week against the Detroit Lions. So I feel like they're going to come in motivated on the opposite side of the ball. So I don't know which way to bet this game. I'm just interested to hear how in the hell the Vikings are damn dogs in this game.
Yeah, I will say the Vikings are 0-4, Jared, against the spread in the last 4 meetings between these two teams. But also, that had the Lions as like heavy underdogs in most of those games that the Vikings couldn't cover the spread. Do you think that the Lions can cover the 2.5 points here, win by a field goal or more?
Absolutely. All right, where do we even begin here, right? Like, where do we even start? Let's start with the last game that these two teams played, which was a game dominated by the Lions until the final 8 minutes of the fourth quarter when Minnesota
we were all on the
scored
line.
Yeah, and they covered by a half a point. And the Lions at one point in the late third quarter had like a 94% win probability. I mean, that game was done and dusted. And then the Lions just collapsed and the Vikings, I don't know what it's like they're sleeping with angels this year. So if you flipped every one score game the Vikings played in this season and you said it was the opposite, like if all the coin flip games they've played in, if you flip the results, they'd be 1-11 this year. I mean, it's that easy, right? Like they are literally one bounce of the ball away from losing. Out of their 10 wins, 9 of them out the window, besides their first game against Green Bay, which was a very decisive win. All of their other 9 wins have been coin flip games where they've had to overcome deficits, or they've had balls bounce their way, or the Jets go 1 for 6 in the red zone and they can't. I mean, the Jets outgained the Vikings in that game by over 200 yards. They were a plus 1.5 net yards per play. I mean, it was just moving the ball up and down the field at ease and then just pissing down their leg in the red zone every single time. Yeah. And I think the Lions have a little bit more stable of a running game. And really the reason why this number is what it is the DVOA, which has kind of become like an industry standard line setting metric, one of the big metrics that Vegas uses to kind of set these lines every week. The Vikings have the lowest DVOA of any 10-2 team in the history of the statistic. It's never been recorded lower. So they're just a very average football team that has a couple of really nice players on offense, but metrically down to down, they are a very average football team. Meanwhile, the Lions are 5-0 against the spread in their last 5. They're covering by over 12 points in that spread. Lauren mentioned the only loss was to the Bills by a field goal on Thanksgiving, and then the Bills followed that up with a shellacking of the Patriots. So the Bills clearly are still the Bills, right? And the Lions were toe for toe in that game. During that stretch, this 5-0 ATS stretch, the Lions are 4th in efficiency on offense, 15th on defense. And I know that doesn't sound great, but in weeks 1 through 8, to put it in perspective, the Lions were 32nd in defense. So they have moved up the standings dramatically, both offensively, where they were kind of in the 20 range, and defensively, where they've gone from last to now middle of the pack. And you have to ask yourself, all right, well, why? What's the improvement? Like what is happening that is making this Lions team playing better? I give a lot of credit to Ben Johnson. If you recall, he took over the passing game for Anthony Lynn mid-season last year. And Anthony Lynn got shoved out of town, obviously, right? And now with Ben Johnson, kind of assuming full offensive coordinator duties, you've seen Jared Goff become much more comfortable. This is also one of the best offensive lines in football, top 10 PFF grade all season, top 5 in run block win rate. The defense still struggles to get pressure, but Aiden Hutchinson has emerged as one of the better young players in this league. Last year's third-round pick, Alim McNeil, starting to play better. 13 of his 23 pressures have come in the last 3 weeks, so they're getting a little bit more pressure on the edge, marginally speaking. The secondary is what's really, I think, improved. All 3 safeties are grading out above average. Jeff Okudah is starting to get healthy. Aaron Glenn, as defensive coordinator, is starting to get comfortable with some of his blitzing schemes and cover schemes. And overall, Detroit has faced the 3rd toughest schedule of offenses. So it's fair to say that they are going to improve defensively down the stretch, facing a somewhat easier schedule. They're first in, like we talked about the red zone all day. Detroit is the number 1 red zone scoring offense in the NFL at 73% with their touchdown percentage. They're 84% over the last 3 weeks. There's just so many things to like about this Lions team, and there's so many things to not like about this Vikings team. I'm not surprised at all this line opened where it is and has moved towards Detroit. And I wouldn't be shocked if they blow them out by 2 or 3 scores. I would not be shocked in the slightest if this game's like 40-17 Detroit. Not shocked at all.
You see, I feel like if the Vikings came in favored, I could really see that happening easily. But the fact that Vegas made them 10-2 dogs going into Detroit, I think just because Vegas did that, you're going to get a different Vikings team. And that's what really scares me about everything in this game besides the total. Because I believe that extra motivation that you give a 10-2 team is saying that, hey, you're 10-2, but you still suck really because you're going to lose to a 5-7 team at home. You already talked about everything that Detroit's done, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. But just that little bit of motivation that Vegas just gave the Vikings, I believe that's going to be something huge that we need to watch this weekend.
I'm excited for this game, guys. I am so excited for the Detroit Lions and their offense to do what they can do in front of a home crowd. That is my best bet of the day, Jared. I know it's going to be yours too. I'm looking forward to getting to Tanks. Before we do, guys, let's talk one more game. Monday Night Football. Patriots taking on the Cardinals. Pats laying at 1.5 in this spot. Total set at 44.5. Both teams fighting for a playoff berth. Kind of. The Pats have dropped to the last place in the AFCs, 6-6, back-to-back losses, most recently to the Bills in Week 13. The Cardinals are barely hanging on, 4-8 on the season, coming off of a bye this week. The Pats, they've lost all 3 of their primetime games this year, and 2 of them they got blown out. They haven't been up for these big games. They're hoping that this one's different. And the Cardinals are just a strange team this year. They're very inconsistent from week to week. And home field advantage really hasn't meant anything to them this year, basically. They lost their last 3 at home. They're coming off a bye this week, though. They're well rested. Do you think they have a fighting chance against the Patriots team and a Bill Belichick coached defense, Tank, laying a couple points?
Man, it was almost hard to watch that New England offense against the Buffalo Bills on Thursday Night Football. The Buffalo Bills defense had Mac Jones talking to his coaches like the defensive player was talking to Russell Wilson, like getting at his neck because the coaches had Mac Jones looking like Russell Wilson between the white lines. Like, it's crazy. Like, everybody got Russell Wilson in that game, and it was hard to watch. And so now you get to play against Arizona team that's coming off a bye and a tough loss to where the Chargers, who are known for charging, actually pulled off a last-second win against those Arizona Cardinals. And so I feel like if anyone can kind of disrupt Arizona's offense, it would be Bill Belichick, because he just knows how to take away your favorite weapon and just kind of make you just look just disorganized and disheveled. And we really haven't seen the Arizona Cardinals execute consistently this entire season. So I don't know why that would change now against one of the better defenses in the league that have been known to create pressure. And we've seen how Kyler can react when he can't really have a clean pocket and trying to find wide receivers down the field. And then on the flip side, Arizona Cardinals defense hasn't been that bad. We've seen the struggles of the New England Patriots offense. I don't know if we're going to see. I mean, I doubt we see the Mac Jones that we saw against the Minnesota Vikings, where he's just throwing the ball all around the field and throwing for damn near 400 yards. I don't believe we're going to see that Mac Jones against the Arizona Cardinals. So, if anything, it's like, man, it's going to be a low scoring game. There's what 44 and a half right now. Maybe you lean towards the under, but I have no clue like who's going to win this game just because both of these teams have been pretty volatile in the way that they've been playing over the past few weeks. So it's more than likely something that I wouldn't touch. But if there's any lean that I have, it would probably be the under, given the inefficiency
The
of both
Pats
of
have
these
the better
offenses.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Pats have the better defense. The Cardinals have the better offense. Jared, who wins?
Yeah, I kind of lean New England here, right? Like this is Kyler Murray. I still kind of consider him like a really young, rookie, inexperienced quarterback. And those are the types of quarterbacks that Bill Belichick usually has success on. And the primetime nature of this game and the fact that the Patriots have really struggled in primetime this season kind of leads me to believe that you'll see a really good effort from them coming off of a couple losses here. The line movement tells me New England's the right side. We've seen this move off of a pick 'em early in the week. I don't have a strong opinion on the total. Like I could absolutely see Bill Belichick and this defense just completely shutting down Kyler Murray. But Arizona's defense is what scares me. And the Patriots have played one of the toughest schedules of offenses this year. So their defensive numbers, maybe you have to make a slight manual adjustment. They're already a top 5 defense, but maybe you also have to make a slight manual adjustment that maybe their defense is playing a little bit better than we think because they've played a really tough schedule of offenses so far. And I don't think this Arizona offense is really in sync or in rhythm right now. So I could see this game playing out. I like Tank's adjective, very volatile. Like I absolutely could see Arizona having a little bit of success, but then their defense just gets shredded in this game, and we see somewhere both teams easily get into the 20s. But I absolutely could see Arizona really struggling offensively against Bill Belichick's defense and Kyler Murray kind of going into the tank. And then, the Patriots are up like 20-3 in the second half, and then it's just run, and, forget you're over there. So I could see this game playing out both ways. It's really how Arizona's defense plays. They've been a bottom 10 unit all year. They've struggled a lot this season. If their defense is up to the task and they keep Mac Jones and this very average Patriots offense at bay, then they'll have a chance in this game. If not, I think Mac Jones in the running game could get going a little bit because look at those defenses they faced the last few weeks. They've been tough. Jets, Bills. So I could see New England having a little more success offensively here against, fast track in Arizona. Arizona, I think you've given me that stat. What's Arizona's home record? They've lost like 10 straight home games.
It's not good. It's like 1-9 over their last 10 home games.
Imagine that, Tank.
Like that.
Imagine you lose 10
crazy.
straight home games. Like, get out of here. Like, you can't bet that team at home.
Bad. They've lost the last 3 at home, and New England is 0-4 straight up in their last 4 primetime games. So Pat's really looking to take advantage of primetime game against a team that's bad at home. Before we get into our best bets, let's bet it presented by Superbook Sports. Make sure to go to superbook.com or download the app today. And this season, guys, we are rooting for safeties. That's because Superbook will give you a $50 bonus on each safety scored this season. Just place a $100 pregame bet on any spread or any total. And if there's a safety scored in any game on Sunday, you, my friends, get a $50 bonus. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. All right, best bets. Tank, coming to you first. Who you got for week 14?
Man, give me Miami at the Chargers over 52. I believe that's what we have right now. And this for me is simple. Like a couple of weeks ago, it was trending on Twitter. Like there was this huge argument about who's better, who has more weapons at their disposal between Justin Herbert and playing without any guys on the outside, and Tua having like his luxury of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill on the outside. And so now we have the opportunity to see these two guys in a kind of prime time matchup where the highlight is going to be on them. And so I really feel that with both of these teams coming in off tough losses, that they're going to be motivated as hell to get their offenses back on track. Really hope that the Chargers have Mike Williams so they can have their full complement of weapons. I think we will see Tua bounce back and be a more accurate quarterback. I expect a lot of points in this game, so give it over.
Over, baby. Points. Gerard, who you got?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, this is probably my easiest bet of the season besides that Cowboys-Vikings game a couple weeks ago. This line stuck out to me like a sore thumb. We discussed this Lions-Vikings game at length. I won't beat it with a dead horse. Go back and, scroll to the part of the show where we went into this game in full detail. But I will leave you this. This Vikings team is the most fraudulent 10-win team in the history of the NFL. I will be fading them at every turn that I can until I am proven right. I don't care how much money I waste, but this Vikings team is a fade until further notice. I don't know how they've won 10 games. They are playing like a 500 football team metrically. All the metrics that I nerd out on every single week tells me this Vikings team should be the 5-7 team, and the Lions should be closer to a 10-2 record heading into this stage of the season. So I think the line is fair. Not only is the line fair, but the movement coming off of that line, even though I understand the gasp reaction that this team is a 10-win underdog against the 5-win favorite, but you have to just look underneath the surface, underneath the hood, and see, how the engine's running. And this Vikings team's running like a Pinto, where the Lions more like a Beamer. So I will gladly take Detroit. I think 2 is the fair number here. 1, you're not going to find a 1 anymore. I did get 1 early in the week. It was a 3-unit bet for me too. But I think 2 is where we'll call it fair market value here as we record this on a Wednesday. And yeah, go Lions, LJ. Let's roll, baby.
I love the fact that you're calling the top and then putting your foot on that throat while you're at it. I love it. Oh my goodness.
I love it. One pride, baby. One pride. That was it for us today, guys. That's it for us today. Find us on the Pickswise YouTube channel. Go to Pickswise.com. This is Pickswise Playbook, Week 14, presented by Superbook Sports. That's Tank Williams. That's Jared Smith. I'm Lauren Jabara. We'll see y'all Week 15.